And Connie gave Myrica, it was homeopathic 3X Myrica, so it's 1 part in 1,000. Semi-herbal. They're more homeopathic than herbals. And within a day, it switched the head around and the pregnancy was fine. And I just had to presume that the more and more I learned about the uterus, it just can do things. It really can take care of business. And I always compare it to the stomach too, and I didn't know about this complex musculature, but the stomach segregates the carbohydrates, the fats, it segregates different parts of your meals in different ways, and the proteins, and all the proteins may be together, all the carbohydrates, or maybe all the more fibrous stuff or whatever, but at any rate, it'll get it in little pockets and work on them separately, almost like little fingers and stuff, and then dumps them one by one. So you eat a meal all at once, but it tends to segregate it more. Also, the taste buds segregate it some too. The taste buds put little flags on. You're a carbohydrate, you're a protein, and then it drops down, and then the pancreatic enzymes can read it better, and so it'll drop down more of the protein at once, more of the carbohydrate at once. So the stomach is really intelligent too, completely autonomic, completely under the little radar of consciousness. But these muscles are just incredibly intelligent. So that's true of the uterus too. So, and I do think in older days, the people took care of themselves better. And nowadays, part of modern medicine is just like an excuse to get sick sometimes and not take care of yourself. Oh, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you eat. It doesn't matter. Well, they do say exercise. They do care about food. They do care about exercise. But a 19th century book is like, oh, to a young woman, don't get your feet wet. Don't get you get chill. And you go up your legs and get cramps and spasms and so on. And Rosita Arvijo, she's a herbalist in Belize, and she learned womb manipulation from Mayan healer down there. And she says there's Mennonites down there. They just if a little girl falls out of a tree or something, they just bring her over and make sure her womb is in place. And that's what the Indians and the Belizean people in general do down there, is that they make sure the womb's in place and they keep care of it. And they're much more attentive. Well, that's just one organ, There's just so many, like digestion, like regular medicine. It's like they don't use carminatives in this country. They do in Europe. But you're getting older, you're not digesting well. Hey, you should take a carminative, a bitter or bitter pungent or pungent remedy before or after a meal to digest better. It's like, you're 75, you're going to go to Christmas dinner or Thanksgiving dinner. You should be doing a carminative. And if nothing else, there's plenty of carminatives in the liquor store.
That's true. Another thing about fibroids that I want to mention is that fibroids are hormonally active. So every month they grow, and then after the period they shrink, and they grow and they shrink, and they grow and they shrink. A polyp is not hormonally active, it doesn't grow in relation to hormones. It may grow because of the irritation, it may wrap more mucus around it, but it's not hormonally active. A fibroid is. Yarrow, back to yarrow, I use yarrow as a liver herb and a kidney herb. So it is a bitter. It activates the flow of bile out of the liver. I think it helps the liver break down hormones. Like blessed thistle will do that too. Sometimes I'll use blessed thistle and yarrow together for women who have PMS and hormones are out of balance. I'll probably add some essential fatty acids and other things in there too to help, especially in the primrose oil, bring those hormones back into balance. But yarrow, I think, is a really good liver herb, and it can make the urine cloudy. So I have people taking yarrow a lot, and I'm not sure. It makes the urine cloudy and oily. So I have people watch their urine when they start taking yarrow, and I don't know if it's cleansing. I don't know if it's cleansing the kidneys out, or if it's cleansing the liver through the kidneys and it's coming out, or if it's irritating the bladder and the cloudiness is mucus in the bladder. And there's also a possibility.
Could be
But it's-
bacteria or something.
I think it's bacteria because it's not stringy. Usually mucus from the bladder that shows up in urine is kind of stringy because it's got to come through the urethra, which stretches it out. This is just cloudiness that comes when, so often.
Like proteins.
Proteins is what I'm talking about. Maybe some fats and proteins that it's clearing and cleansing out of the kidneys. But it's the liver, it's the kidneys only act if the liver tells them to. And the liver produces, is it albumin that signals the kidneys to act. So this is why people with liver disease start holding fluid and their kidneys pretty much quit working, is because they're not getting the signal, the kidneys aren't getting the signal from the liver for action. So I think this somehow helps Yarrow helps that process between the liver and kidneys, and it helps the liver signal to the kidneys, okay, work, cleanse. And so I use it as a kidney cleanse, not a diuretic, not what you think of as a normal kidney cleanse, but on a deeper kidney level. Remove excess proteins, remove excess fats that have been building up here that are stuck in the membranes, and you can really see the cloudiness of the urine, and the urine will have an odor to it. I usually ask people, and I use this as a decoction, and it tastes bitter and pungent and acrid all at the same time. It doesn't taste like the tincture. The decoction doesn't. It doesn't taste like the tincture at all.
You decoct it for what, 20 minutes or not?
Yeah, about 15. And there is an oiliness in the Yarrow decoction that you don't taste in the tincture. There's a Yarrow oil in there. There's and that's what I think is triggering the liver, is the oiliness of the Yarrow is triggering the liver, and then that is signaling the kidneys, and then all that's filtering through. So I usually have people just do it for like 4 or 5 days. So people who have gallbladder trouble, this is especially useful for. Because whenever the gallbladder is overstressed, like from too much fats or too much meat, some people are having gallbladder pain, the gallbladder is a little swollen, they're definitely having gallbladder difficulty or gallbladder attack, the liver shuts down and the kidneys take over, a lot of the cleansing of the body. Because the gallbladder is not functioning, the bile's not getting through. This is when you don't eat fats you need to go off your fats, you need to go on a gallbladder-friendly diet, let your gallbladder rest. But the kidneys are having to pick up part of the detoxification the liver normally does, but because the kidneys isn't getting the full signal from the liver to be active, the urine is pretty scant and it is very dark. It almost gets brownish red looking. And so this is how I can tell somebody has a poor gallbladder by the color of their urine. It is that color, and that's a unique color called urine to gallbladder difficult. And Yarrow is very helpful for that. And it acts on the liver, gallbladder, and kidneys, and it really helps the whole process. Yes, ma'am.
This 4 to 5 day segment, how often would you do that?
Well, your urine should be clear but cloudy and not look concentrated anymore. So usually just, that time period, and I say maybe twice a year. It's a good, like, at the end of winter cleanse when you've not been eating fresh foods.
So you have them drink, what, a half a cup twice a day type of thing?
Yeah, or maybe even a quarter cup, depending on how strong the person's kidneys are. If somebody had weak kidneys, I would do less, so like a quarter of a cup.
So yesterday when we were walking and we were talking about the goldenrod, people, you talked about it being cleansing for the kidneys. Would you put these two together?
No, I think this is totally different, because there's an oiliness to the Yarrow decoction you don't get with a goldenrod decoction. Goldenrod has that latex in it, which also, has its own set of the properties for the liver and kidneys. But there's this kind of like pungent oiliness that Yarrow has that really comes out in the decoction, and I think that's what triggers. So I always have used it as a simple reason.
Yeah, it's a pretty strong herb, and
Yeah.
goldenrod's a bit of a strong diuretic, and say nettles would be another one you might think of for cleaning the kidneys, You don't need to make them stronger.
Right.
Any of these.
One at a time is enough. One at a time is enough.
Yeah, well, this is interesting because I have never mentioned it, but it seems like often when yarrow is needed as a for fever, the skin is somewhat oily, sweaty, which there's two kinds of sweat, watery and oily. Actually, Jude had that oily sweat some. And it's also in some places, not everywhere. Like you were sweating up here a little bit, but not down here. Well, I guess you can sweat up there more, but so that may fit in too. It is interesting. I'm going to use this way. It's a major herb in European folk medicine, a yarrow poultice for hepatitis. Remember, it's cooling. And it changes blood flow a lot, so it is going to act on the liver and the kidneys. I would think, even without the oil explanation, that it's just going to open and close capillaries so much it can adjust things. Also, it is a really good bladder infection remedy. It's one of the top 3, I'd say. Yeah.
Use it for that too.
Yeah.
Use it for bladder infection.
And looking at this, you could even have something going on in the kidney that's spreading down to the bladder. Yeah. So.
It's worth trying. I mean, I think it's very, I just got it really useful. I have got to have a potty break. I'm sorry, y'all can keep talking, but.
One thing about blue vervain I forgot about is it is good for kidney infections too. So a lot of people with kidney infection have been applying their willpower too strong. Willful, fanatics driven. Well, let's see. So that is yarrow, unless she has some more to say about it. Bonnie, do you have any further things to say about it?
I love trout, it's one of my favorite trout herbs.
Yeah.
I learned this a lot from my friends. I love the trout. I truly lost some interest with yarrows. I think I was telling you guys last night, I had something out of the hospital in 3 days. You know, just using yarrows.
Yeah, we could go on and on and on
Yeah.
about and when I first started using it for really bad cuts and stuff, when Victor had that dream, and I thought, wow, I went to a herb conference or two, and I asked every herbalist I could get a hold of. Herbalists, whether it's Susan Lee, I didn't talk to Susan Lee at that time, but just everybody I could talk to. Have you ever, have you ever had a very severe cut, or how have you used yarrow? Yeah, so everybody used it that way. And Susan Lee, one time, so I was at Green Nations in New York, and Lisa Wolf came out as my guest of Jane Friedman. She was at the teacher's dinner, and we were sitting across from Susan Lee, and Susan Lee was talking about how she was chopping food, and boom, she took off the edge of her finger, and she's bleeding all over the place. And Lisa's just this young, wet behind the ears herbalist, about 29 or so, and she said, "And so did you use yarrow?" And I was afraid, Susan Lee could be a bit testy, and what if she didn't use yarrow? But Susan said, "Yeah, it was really great." And they were like total sisters after that. So, let's see. I hate to start on anything else. Any questions? Let's see. I think we'll go on to sumac next, partly because it is a remedy for profuse uterine bleeding, but where it's watery, which is not a major use for it. But let's do sumac. And so around here we have the Rhus typhina in profusion, which is really nice. I really like the Minnesota-Wisconsin landscape for the somewhat New England too, for the profusion of in the fall for the just tremendous groves of the little sumacs everywhere. They don't generally get high. Well, they can get up to about where the top of the TV is, but mostly you see them just small, and they're so brilliant, so magnificent, and it adds yet another texture to the fall colors. And it's very common out here in the western Midwest because we're near the prairies, so you have open fields and it just grows everywhere. It's just such a beautiful plant. So predominantly we have the Rhus typhina, which is the staghorn sumac, which happens to be my favorite because it so imitates a deer horn. It's so much a deer or elk medicine, so elk medicine. But there's also Rus glabra, which does grow here too, which is smooth sumac, and it looks just like the staghorn, except instead of having that fur on the end, it's smooth there. And then there's one called Rus aromatica, which smells nice in the east and grows all the way out into the Rockies and maybe even California, I'm not sure, and certainly into New Mexico and Arizona. It it's called stinkwork out there. It's Rus aromatica. So in the east it smells nice, out in the west it smells bad. Michael Moore thought that it was maybe that it was trying to discourage, that the change in the smell had to do with it was trying to discourage animals from eating it. So maybe not, I don't know. That's the official one, but I've always used the Rus typhina. They're pretty interchangeable. Phyllis actually has a different one, so she can go over that. They're pretty interchangeable, except Rus glabra was used a little bit more for diarrhea, and they're all for fluid loss, for losing fluids one way or the other. So that includes too much sweating, too much peeing, diarrhea, expectorant that's like thin mucin, just thin, clear mucus, and menstrual blood that's thin and, that's serous or thin and watery. And the Greek name Rus means to flow, so it even has that. And this is used in, so there's yet another variety that's Rus coriaria, which is native to Kurdistan and Turkey. And that's in Arabic cooking, and that's that. So it has the same color as our sumac, tastes exactly identical. You get it at an Arabic grocery store, and it's that burgundy red, like powder that you put on white rice. And white rice without it is a bummer. It's sour and a little stringent. It's really nice on rice. So you can get that and use that if you can't collect it. But right now is the time to collect, and it's not going to last. Once you pass September 1st, boy, you've got to really search the countryside to find some good sumac. Been there, done that. You want to get it when it's nice and fully mature. It's mature from late August for about 6 weeks. It's in its heyday. They keep growing a new one. You don't want the old one. The new one gets worms and insects. You want the one that just came out. You want to get it when it didn't rain because the rain washes the acids out. So you want to get it a couple days without rain, just fresh and new. And you just take 2 or 3 of those and you can fill a whole quart jar full of vodka.
Just snap right up.
You wouldn't use brandy for that one, vodka. And it's really cool. It tinctures out really nice red. So, you have different ones. You want to describe that?
Yeah, we have staghorn, we have smooth,
Okay.
and we have another one called winged sumac. And instead of like the staghorn, it does look like a staghorn. The smooth looks very similar. Winged is like way big, bushy out here. It's like fingers together out here, bushy, the wings. We also have stinky sumac.
Does winged have wings on it?
It has wings
Yeah.
on the little edges of the stems, right? Little wings on that. And I use it more for upper respiratory. I use it more for lungs and more for bladder because the signature is spreading like wings and the wings on the tip. It's more aerial, looks more airy, so I use it for movement, lungs. And we also have the stinky sumac they have out west. We call it stinky, not fragrant. And we have poison sumac, which is not used medicinally. And instead of the berries on all the other sumacs range from anywhere from a rusty brown to a bright red, right? So the poison sumac has berries not on the individual stems the way sumac normally does, usual sumac does. It's clustered at the top of the plant and the berries are white. So it's very obvious. It's different from the other sumac. It does cause basically a rash. This
Poison
pretty much
ivy.
like poison ivy.
Yeah,
It's
and
the same family,
I
right?
think it's the same. It's the same species, but like we were saying, the species is so tricky. It will assume
Right.
different forms and imitate other plants. And yesterday it looked like it was imitating the Apios, and it'll imitate the vines and one that would come off a tree looking like a branch, and this goes on and on. And then mostly in central Minnesota, we just have it growing. It's too cold, it just grows on the ground, so it's not so bad, but it's all the same species.
So anyway, so poison sumac likes swamps. That's the other thing. It grows in a swamp. So I go to South Alabama and head down on the coast. There's just like acres and acres of it along the road because it's all swampland down there. We don't even have it where I live, up on the mountain, but it is a caution. The old folks where I live call sumac shumake, and people still call it shumake. If I say, "Would you have, can I pick your sumac?" which I said to somebody the other day, because they got a huge elderberry tree in the field and a huge, wonderful sumac, and I said, "Can I come and get some elderberries and sumac?" And they were like, "Yeah, you can get the elderberries, but what is a sumac?" And I said, "Oh, I'm sorry, shumake. Can I come and get her some shumake berries?" Because that's a common name there, because during World War II, shoe bottoms were made from, shoe soles were made from the sumac root. And that's why they call it shumake, up until World War II. So it was used, by cobblers to make that, not the very sole, but the frame of the shoe was made from the sumac root. So, and also gun stocks.
Things that they use as a mold for the shoe?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And so that's why it became the common name, became shoemake, because people made money gathering the roots and selling them for a shoe manufacturing.
Yeah, that's where art imitates nature, because, or I don't know what to say, but the name actually is sumac, and that's an Arabic name that comes into Europe from, if you say that to an Arab, they know exactly what you're talking about.
Sumac or
sumac, so it's a coincidence then that they made shoe molds from it, and then it became a shoe.
Shoemake is what my mother would say, "Are you getting some more of that shoemake?" So, everybody there, everybody kind of like in my part of the South calls it shoemake. So it loves growing along fence lines, and it does cluster, so you can get little groves of it. It gets about as tall as the TV where I live, maybe sometimes a little bit taller, depending on which species it is. It likes moist soil. It doesn't like wet soil, which is different from the poison variety. And so you often find it on the side of the hill, leading down to the water, or down, especially in pastures, where you got a little drainage or a little ravine pasture. It likes the side there. Like it's growing along fence lines, and generally sassafras and shumake will vie for the same territory. And so usually if I gather one, I gather both, because they're right there. They like exactly the same habitat, sassafras and shumake. I use it for a blood builder. In addition to everything Matthew said, I use it for a blood builder. It supports the kidneys, and the kidneys releases a hormone called
Erythropoietin.
say it again.
Erythropoietin.
Erythroprotein.
Poietin.
Oh, never mind, whatever he said. I know how to spell it.
It's
My tongue's
been a
not-
half a day learning that
That name. So the hormone the kidney releases encourages or causes the red blood cells to pick up iron. So people who are extremely anemic often get shots of this to make them not anemic to pick up more iron. Well, sumac does the same thing without the
I
shot.
think what it does is it signals the bone marrow to produce more hemoglobin. So
Does it? See, I always thought it signaled the kidneys. The reason I think it signals the kidneys is because of the number of clients I've had over the years on dialysis. And people on dialysis are always anemic because it takes everything out of the blood.
Well, isn't the erythropoietin
Okay.
the hormone that talks to the bone marrow? It tells
Yeah.
it to me?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, okay, so we're saying the same thing.
Yeah.
but different ways, right. So, so I've used it over the years as not only a blood builder for women who have anemia from periods, because it's excellent for that, but also for people on dialysis. And it does not interfere with dialysis. And I've had clients that for the first time since they've been on dialysis were not anemic. And you can see it in the blood work, because every time they went to get dialysis, they got blood work. So we could see, and the only herb they were doing was sumac, and so we could obviously see the change that it made in their blood work, because they were not doing anything. And they're very even limited on what vitamins and minerals they can take. Anybody work with dialysis that, there's a list of things people on dialysis can't take, like calcium, because this is what's being filtered out of the blood. So anyway, I had one client who was on home dialysis, and she had to do it 4 times a week, twice a day. And her kidneys had died because of Tylenol poisoning, which is very common. I would say Tylenol is the #1 reason, not disease-oriented, that people end up on dialysis. And it's the number kind of horribly easy way to commit suicide. It takes about 3 days for somebody to die. But it's a common suicide kill, too. So anyway, she had ended up with her kidneys dying from dialysis. They weren't 100% dead, but they were less than 12% functional. Right? So they were still a little bit dead. So anyway, I taught her, I don't use tincture of sumac, of course. I use a decoction, and when you gather your sumac, it needs to feel tacky to your fingers. The oily acids are on the outside, and it feels very tacky.
In a pleasant way, though.
In a pleasant way. And that never dries. And it can take, I've used sumac I gathered 4 years ago, and as long as it's tacky, it's usable. When it gets dry, it tastes good, but you've lost most of your medicine. It'll still be a little sour. It's not going to be active.
Talking the berries.
Yeah, berries. But you can use leaves and roots. They're just much stronger. So berries are renewable, harvest every year. So anyway,
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
So much easier to use the berries.
yeah, it is.
No, you said that you picked it and you still used it for 4 years?
Yeah, it dried. Because as long as it's tacky,
Right.
it's usable. And it keeps very good dried in a paper bag.
Do you leave it all together, or do you actually break all the berries apart?
No, I leave it together. I just
Yeah.
throw the whole top in the bag.
Yeah. What I did, I put mine in the dehydrator and then put it in a plastic bag.
That's fine. I put mine in plastic bags, as long as it's tacky.
Yeah.
So you can feel when you take it out. If it's tacky, it's fine. But it needs air. So don't close your bags up really tight.
Okay.
It needs a little air circulation in there. So anyway, I taught her how to make up sumac tea, which was 1 of the tops in a quart of water, about 15-20 minutes until the water turns bright red. She could add honey to it or not, depending on her taste. It has a sour/bitter taste. You can taste the bitterness. And to drink a glass a day, split up over the day. So a glass split up so it'd be 1/3 a cup 3 times a day till the glass was gone. The first time she went back for blood work, she wasn't anemic anymore. And her energy was up. And here's the good part. She went down to only 1 time she had to do home dialysis. And then she only went to every other day. She didn't have to go in. She didn't have to do it like all those days. So it does have an action on the kidneys. We saw that. The kidneys improved. Functioning began to come back. Traditionally in the South, if she hadn't been on dialysis, I would have added smartweed to it. Because smartweed is a potentiator for kidney formulas. And it helps activate the kidneys. My grandmother used it, Tommy used it, everybody uses it. If you've got a kidney formula, you don't put cayenne, you don't put lobelia, you put Pennsylvania smartweed. Or use the water pepper smartweed, or use the lady's thumb. Some kind of smartweed needs to go in it. And I didn't put that as hers because I didn't know what it would do with a dialysis, but normally I do. But I did see with her that sumac does itself activate the kidneys and improve kidney function, and that was clear. And she was in to see me because she was on dialysis. She wanted to have a baby. And I was going, this ain't going to happen. I'm sorry, you're on dialysis. It's not going to happen. And she had just gotten married. Had been married a 1.5 years when her kidneys died. Didn't have a baby. She really wanted to have a baby. She was African American, and she was just like really grieving. I want a baby really bad. And I was like, there's so many babies, please adopt, or, but you can't be on dialysis and have a, it's just not, your kidneys are not going to support that. Dialysis is not going to support cleansing for two. It's just not going to happen. But she did her kidney functioning slowly, and it was amazing how much her kidneys did heal just using Sumac. And then she went down to even less dialysis. And then I lost track of her, which meant, as we said yesterday, she either died or got better. But it was a really good kind of lesson in what Sumac can do that you really could see that it did. Also, I use Sumac for viral infections. It's in my flu remedy. And James Duke, if you know who James Duke is or not, he wrote the medicinal plant book. Phil Guy, along with, who is that? He wrote with?
Foster.
Stephen Foster. And he also has a medicinal plants database that, he worked for the USDA for 30 or 35 years investigating medicinal plants. So he has an amazing medicinal plant database. And traditionally in my area, Sumac is a flu remedy. And I usually mix it with elderberry, and I make an elderberry Sumac syrup that I use for coughs, colds, flu, kids get sick, they make Sumac elderberry syrup, and it's just good to keep you healthy. They put it on their pancakes, they put it, whatever you're eating, Sumac and elderberry syrup go on, and you get all these great immune fighters. But Duke said that Sumac had more antiviral and antibacterial activity than any other plant he had ever investigated. It was number one. And I was like, oh, this just fits in with traditional use for pneumonia, for flus, for viruses, for fevers of unknown origin. So Sumac is really good for that. So I use Sumac for kidneys, and then I use Sumac for flu, or viruses, and then I use Sumac for lungs.
For what?
Lungs. It's a really good cough, cold, flu, asthma, pneumonia remedy. It works a lot different from the Elecampane, which I also really love and use for lung disorders. But if somebody has got like allergies, and it's like they got mucus and the bronchial tubes or drainage, and it's not fully asthma all the time, but it's there and they can feel it, or seasonal allergies, I think Sumac works like really amazing for that.
Yeah, I got to say, I use raspberry leaf for that fair amount, which ought to be very simpatico with Sumac. I mean, they kind of remind you of each other.
They do.
Yeah, and again, real clear, thin mucus that's and from either head cold or an allergy. And I've wanted to use this, but the raspberry leaf has worked better. And when speaking of allergies, you always got to say this is what works in my region, because every region is different. So
We don't have raspberries.
yeah. Oh well. So wow. Holy buckets.
It's too hot. but it was Dr. Christopher's favorite long flu remedy.
Yeah. And I would say, and Dr. Christopher and so many people, you can't tell whether they're talking about a stomach flu or a lung flu, but it actually is for both.
Right.
Things, yeah.
Yeah, we don't have raspberry. I found some this year on top of the mountain. It's like and I was like, oh my God, is this really raspberries? I had to eat one to see if it really was. The berries were right.
Cool.
It was the first time I ever saw raspberries in the wild. And then I was like, oh, somebody lived here and they planted them. Because it was the side of an old home place.
Oh,
It was
yeah.
like, oh yeah. And they're on the bluff. They're on the edge of the bluff, so you have to climb down the bluff.
Are they fairly interchangeable? I mean, you may have said that at the beginning.
The
The
different kinds of
Sumacs, yeah.
Sumacs, I think they are.
You said there's a specific maybe for the wing.
Yeah, I just see that as more almost.
Signature, yeah.
The signature. It's almost like the little areoles of the lunge. You just like see them there, which is also a good signature for lymph.
Yeah.
So, I think it's a good lymphatic also, I guess.
Yeah, like really, really weepy, profuse, weepy lymphatic. I used to
Yeah.
a girl, teenager, she'd be writing on a paper in her wet.
Oh my gosh.
It was that bad.
Shoot, what?
Just
This
be
is her
writing,
period?
and
Oh.
the paper would be wet.
Oh, yeah, sweaty. I guess it's sweaty.
I used to make that.
I use it also for people who have sweaty, stinky feet. You know, and they try everything they can and your feet are still sweaty. You know, that's a lip thing too. And so Sumac has worked well for kind of drying that up.
Oh,
Yeah, I'm going to mention a couple things. I learned about this separately from
It's wet all
Phyllis, and what I learned from her is so, I mean, it just interlocked so well. Yeah, I can't remember how I learned about this, but at any rate, yeah, for profuse peeing, and that can be diabetes insipidus or diabetes mellitus. It is a very good diabetes remedy. That's diabetes type 2. And one case, so often you have a case of diabetes type 1. After 20 years, they also become type 2 in a way because they can't handle that artificial insulin get delivered at not the perfect time for 20 years, you know. So they become somewhat insulin resistant, and you can help them with insulin resistance. So type 1 is dependent on insulin. You have to give them supplement. You never want to take them off that. That's not within the herbal purview. Type 2 is insulin resistant, where the insulin won't go into the cell for some reason. That's the one that's spreading so much right now. And this one is for type 2 diabetes. And so I had a case, this is one of the most perfect cases. I'll mention 2 cases. So one, she was a type 1 diabetic for 20 years. So she had all the symptoms. She had type 2 by this point. She's got diabetic retinopathy. She had neuropathy. She had, like when the blood sugar goes down so far, your brain, kind of the higher centers turn off and you become like snake tongue, you know. It's not the full, like you actually get people that do turn into a snake tongue, like they're like possessed by a demon, and then you give them some sugar and their brain comes back online and they're like, what, did I say that, you know? This is semi like that, like where she gets really bitchy with her daughter, and it's not her really, it's her blood sugar. So she was having all those problems, and I figured out to give sumac, and interestingly, just in Virginia, so the local sumac, the smooth sumac did not work there, or not very well. So I sent down the Staghorn sumac from where I was, and that worked really well, and it took care of the neuropathy. It took care of the diabetic retinopathy. Like after 2 weeks, she started seeing so well, she started losing her glasses, forgetting to take. Finally, she just lost her glasses. She didn't need them, and her blood sugar improved, and her moods improved, and all that. I had another case from down here, right down this way, where she came into, a good friend of mine, she rolled in her car into my yard and said, I'm sweating and peeing myself to death. She was so fatigued. It was a hot day, but she was sweating completely. She didn't even get out of the car. She sat there with a friend driving the car. And I said, okay, sumac. And I knew she would take she'd drink like a 32-ounce thing of Mountain Dew 2 or 3 times a day. It's like, so normally I give small doses, but I said, oh, you need 32 ounces of sumac once a day. And I thought, maybe I should even say 3 times a day. Because I wanted her to drink something different. And the sumac berry. So she drank that, and she got way better. She had, let's see, it stabilized her blood sugar and stabilized the sweating and the peeing. She just had no more problem with that. She lost some weight, and she was non-diabetic for a while. I think she became diabetic again later on. But that was pretty dramatic. And so then when I compared notes with Phyllis, I found out that it was good for the kidney anemia, as she called it. So there's many kinds of anemias, and what's really, really interesting is that the plants that are best for anemias are burgundy colored. So that's like beets, beetroot, the Chinese remedy Romani root, which you should really get to know, even though it's a Chinese remedy. It's good for, it increases iron by increasing progesterone, so it's a female remedy for too much bleeding and stuff. Yellow dock root, which maybe helps the assimilation for sure, and maybe Michael Moore thought the storage in the liver of the ferritin. And then in addition, there's leafy green vegetables that have lots of iron. But so each one acts. We don't know how beets act. It doesn't act on the kidneys like this, but they all act differently. And this one acts on the kidneys. So the kidneys secrete the erythropoietin that goes to the bone marrow that produces more hemoglobin, and it's the hemoglobin that picks up the extra iron. So So yeah, they get, so I only had one case myself of that so far since learning about this from Phyllis years ago, but she was sweating way too much and peeing, and she had high blood pressure from her kidney, from essential hypertension, had blown out her, the blood pressure had blown out her kidneys, so she was peeing all the time now. So I thought, oh, sumac, all that was cured. The peeing too much, the high blood pressure, and the anemia, and the sweating too much by the sumac. And the doctor even said, well, I have to write this down in your case notes. Took an herb. He was friendly about it because he couldn't believe that the blood pressure had gone down. That's what he couldn't believe. And so that was a really neat case. And then really at home, close to home, my good friend Martha, where I lived out in western Hennepin County with my neighbors, and we went out eating huge Sunday brunches. So delicious there, Chef Paul. And we're in the middle of dinner, and I had given her, so she started to get her whole case history. She took very much after her father. Her father died at age 52 of a heart attack. Literally plunged off the shore of Lake Superior, one of those turns up, just stroke or heart attack, dead off the cliff, like you hear about those accidents up there. And so at age 52, 53, so when she got to that age, she started to get high blood pressure. She'd get a fissure, rectal fissure. It was like the pressure trying to get out there. And I gave her wild cherry bark and sumac. Again, wild cherry bark just suggests itself. It's the colors and everything kind of fits kind of that way. And it's maybe a high blood pressure remedy, but it's kind of a heart sedative. And then the sumac, now, I guess I'd already had that other case, so I knew it was a high blood pressure remedy, but I also think of it as an astringent that's going to tone the venous side of the circulation, help the blood go through better. Clearly, due to the fissure, she had some problem with that, because when you have fissures and hemorrhoids, well, it was a fissure that pressed out and then tore, but also when you have hemorrhoids, that's like, it could be high blood pressure pressing back down on the portal vein or on veins to like pressure. So she was doing better. Maybe she'd stopped taking it for a little while, and we were at the restaurant, and she's all of a sudden she's like got chest pains, and she's like turning, like looking really sick, and it's like having heart attack symptoms. It's like, oh, I've got chest pains, and there's two of us sitting with her, and it's like, or maybe three, and we go, and I said, Martha, what do you have in your purse? That's an herb. I didn't have anything. Oh, I have the sumac and the wild cherry. Like, take it right now. And that settled that down. And she said, I was really glad to leave that place without being on a stretcher. She did not eat anymore that day, but so she went back on that. And she got through that period. She's now about 61, and she lived through that. And I felt like she went through the thing that her father didn't survive. Like, he didn't know an herbalist. He didn't always have a problem. We know a lot less about high blood pressure 40 years ago. And so that was a court case close to home. Yeah. Yes?
So if somebody has low blood pressure, would you avoid sumac?
Oh, I don't know about that. I wouldn't worry
Not
about too much.
necessarily, because a lot of times the low blood pressure in women is connected to their periods and that sort of thing. And it might actually even help low blood pressure.
I can say one thing too, like
Weight apples.
hawthorn is good for low or high blood pressure.
We can
Yeah.
taste the almond.
Any other questions on sumac? It looks like lunch is about ready.
Yeah. Is lunch about ready or? Hostess? Okay.
It's ready now.
Yeah. All right. Well.
And then if anybody's a vegetarian, we have walnut burgers, just asking for it.
Yum.
And I